The evening at Mar-a-Lago was supposed to be just another closed-door meeting between two of the most powerful minds in the world, Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Both men had shaped industries, disrupted the status quo, and garnered the world's attention in ways that few could comprehend. The estate, with its sprawling grounds and luxurious design, seemed like the perfect backdrop for a conversation about the future. With the warm glow of chandeliers reflecting off polished marble floors, it felt like time itself slowed down. But what was meant to be a discussion about space exploration, artificial intelligence, and the upcoming election, turned into something much deeper. As the two men discussed the future, their words were charged with the weight of their respective legacies. There they were, sitting at opposite ends of the table, talking about monumental changes to the world, the kind of conversation most would only dream of. But there, in the middle of it all, was a quiet presence, Elon Musk's young son, X. At first, he seemed like just an innocent observer, a child among giants. But soon, his presence would prove to be anything but ordinary. His simple question, asked with a quiet yet confident voice, disrupted the conversation. He wasn't just a passive listener, he was an active participant in shaping the course of the evening. It was in this moment, as waves gently crashed against the shore outside, that the true weight of the conversation began to take shape. The two men, accustomed to dominating every room they entered, were now being challenged by a young boy with a question that would linger in the air long after the meeting was over. This was no longer about politics, no longer about space or AI. It was about legacy, about what truly matters when the noise of the world fades away. And the question that X posed would leave both men questioning everything they thought they knew about success and remembrance. As the conversation progressed, the moment came when X, with his piercing blue eyes and a presence far beyond his years, asked a question that no one had expected. His voice, soft yet steady, broke the rhythm of the adult conversation. "Mr. Trump," he asked, "are you afraid of being forgotten?" The question wasn't confrontational, nor was it a challenge. It was simply a question, but one that carried a depth that none of the adults in the room could ignore. In that instant, everything seemed to freeze. The air became heavier, as if the walls of the room had expanded to contain the weight of the question. For a brief moment, Trump's signature bravado faltered. His usual sharpness, that quick retort and unapologetic confidence, was momentarily lost. It was almost imperceptible, the flicker of hesitation that crossed his face, but Musk saw it. Musk, a man who had spent his entire life building companies that would go down in history, building rockets that aimed to reach Mars, knew that this was not just a passing moment. This was something bigger. Trump, always quick to defend himself, to assert his dominance, leaned back, chuckling with his signature laugh. He attempted to brush it off. "Forgotten. I have my name on buildings all over the world," he responded, dismissing the idea as ludicrous. "They'll be talking about me long after we're all gone." But X wasn't swayed by the bravado. He wasn't asking about the brand or the recognition that comes with it. He wanted to know something deeper. X looked directly at Trump, not blinking, not afraid to challenge the man who had made his name a symbol of wealth and power. "What will they say about you in 100 years, he asked. "Will they remember who you really were?" Trump's laugh died down, and for the first time that evening, there was a moment of reflection. The question, though simple, had a profound effect. It wasn't about his name on a building or his fame in the media. It was about the legacy he would leave behind, what the world would remember, and more importantly, how they would remember him. Would they remember the victories, the businesses, the deals? Or would they remember the essence of who he was as a person? The question was one that Trump had never truly considered. For a man who had spent decades striving for greatness, who had battled and fought for every inch of power, the notion that he might not be remembered for who he truly was, but only for the monuments he built, struck a nerve. This moment, as subtle as it was, marked a shift in the conversation. It wasn't about politics or the next big deal anymore. It was about something far more personal, a reflection on the true meaning of legacy. And it was a question that both Trump and Musk would carry with them long after the evening ended. As the conversation unfolded, it became clear that the question X had posed wasn't just an innocent inquiry. It was the kind of question that causes people to pause, to reconsider everything they had once believed about success, power, and the way the world works. X, with his childlike simplicity and razor-sharp insight, had not only unsettled Donald Trump, but he had also forced Elon Musk to think deeply about his own journey. Both men, titans of industry and culture, had built empires, reshaped industries, and left indelible marks on the world. But neither was prepared for the way X's words would shift their perspectives. Trump, after a brief moment of silence, leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers against the table. His mind, always racing with thoughts of strategy and dominance, had never been asked to reflect on something so personal. He had spent decades cultivating an image of invincibility, of success at any cost. But now, for the first time, he was asked to think beyond the surface, beyond the buildings, the rallies, and the tweets. "It's not just about what you build," Trump finally said, his voice lowering, more measured. "It's about how you make people feel." It was as though a different side of Trump was emerging, a side that, for all his bravado and bluster, was deeply human. For all the public performance, the showmanship, and the calculated moves, the weight of X's question had stripped away the armor, even if just for a moment. X, with the same calm composure, responded, asking, "What did you change?" The question hung in the air, and for a second, the world outside the room seemed to fade into nothingness. Trump's mind worked, trying to find an answer that would satisfy both the boy and himself. But there was no quick answer. There was no easy way to explain how one man could change the world, or even if he had. The question was simple, yet it was one that Trump had never considered, not in all his years of fighting, negotiating, and building. What had he truly changed? What would history remember about him, not just as a man who built towers and ran for president, but as a person? Would it be his triumphs, or would it be the more intimate ways he affected the lives of those closest to him? The silence in the room stretched, and it was clear that both Trump and Musk were grappling with something far bigger than their own legacies. X's words had cut deeper than either of them expected, forcing both men to confront the fact that while the world may remember the surface-level achievements, it is the deeper connections, the relationships, and the impact on the people closest to us that define who we really are. In that moment, they both realized that true legacy isn't built on wealth or fame, but on how we make others feel, on how we shape the lives of those we love and care for. It was a revelation that neither Musk nor Trump had been prepared for. Musk, always forward-thinking and focused on the next big thing, found himself reflecting on the time he had sacrificed, the moments lost to the pursuit of innovation and success. Trump, who had spent his life battling for attention and recognition, had been forced to reckon with the question of whether the world would remember him for the right reasons. And X, with his youthful clarity and fearlessness, had opened a door that neither of them had expected to walk through. The conversation had transformed from a political discussion into a deeply personal exploration of what it means to truly be remembered. In that moment, all three of them, Musk, Trump, and X, were questioning not just their legacies, but their lives. And the weight of it all lingered in the room, in the silence that followed, in the soft hum of the waves outside, and in the quiet realization that sometimes, the most powerful questions come from the most unexpected places. As the conversation between Elon Musk, Donald Trump, and X continued, the simple yet profound questions raised by the young boy seemed to echo in the room, growing louder with every passing moment. Musk and Trump, two men who had spent their lives shaping industries and pushing boundaries, now found themselves at the mercy of a question that, in its simplicity, held the power to unravel everything they had spent decades building. The world outside, with its noise, its headlines, and its ever-changing politics, felt distant, almost irrelevant, as the three of them sat together in a rare moment of vulnerability. This wasn't about business strategies, politics, or even the next election. It was about something far deeper, something that neither Musk nor Trump had fully considered until that very moment: legacy. X, with his quiet confidence and piercing gaze, had not only asked Trump about the fear of being forgotten, but he had also asked a question that forced both men to reckon with the ultimate truth: history does not always remember us the way we remember ourselves. History remembers what it wants to remember, and the legacy we leave behind may be shaped by forces we cannot control. Musk, the visionary who had set his sights on the stars and beyond, had been so focused on building his companies, revolutionizing industries, and changing the course of history, that he had neglected the small, intimate moments that truly define a person's legacy. His son's question had made him realize that while he had created the future of space travel and transformed the world with Tesla, there was a price to pay. That price was time spent away from family, missed birthdays, lost moments with those he loved the most. Trump, too, was forced to confront his own humanity. The question about being remembered had struck a chord deep within him, and for the first time, the walls he had so carefully constructed around himself began to crack. Trump had spent his life building an empire, a physical empire of buildings, a political empire built on his own brand of populism, and a media empire that had often placed him at the center of attention. But the question was not about buildings or media coverage. It wasn't about wealth or power. It was about something far more personal: how would history remember him as a person? Would they remember him as a leader, a fighter, or would they simply remember the controversies, the scandals, and the noise that often surrounded his name? Would his legacy be defined by the fights he had won, or by the people he had influenced and the relationships he had built? For the first time in years, Trump was thinking not just about his next big move, but about his own humanity, and whether his legacy would stand the test of time. The conversation that had begun with talk of politics, power, and influence had now shifted into something far more profound. The words that X had spoken, though simple, had peeled back the layers of both men's carefully crafted personas, revealing something more vulnerable underneath. X had asked them to think not just about their achievements, but about the small moments, the quiet, everyday decisions, that truly shaped who they were. It was in these moments that true legacy was formed, not in the grand gestures or the headlines, but in the relationships, the way they made others feel, and the way they had affected the lives of those closest to them. Musk, ever the forward thinker, was now questioning the choices he had made, the sacrifices he had endured, and whether the success he had achieved was worth the price of the moments he had missed. He had always prided himself on moving forward, on building the future. But now, with X's words lingering in the air, he wondered if he had sacrificed too much of the present for a future that was still uncertain. Could he go back and make different choices? Could he have been more present for his family, more present for X? Trump, too, was left to grapple with the uncomfortable truth that while he had built a brand that would echo throughout history, he could not control how he would ultimately be remembered. His question of whether people would remember his name, or remember the man behind it, had no easy answer. But in the silence that followed, both men understood that the true legacy was not about what you had built, but about how you had changed the people around you. The relationships you had nurtured, the lives you had touched, and the way you had made others feel would be what truly defined your legacy. For a brief, fleeting moment, the room was filled not with the sounds of power or dominance, but with the weight of reflection. There, in the presence of a child, both Musk and Trump were forced to reckon with their own mortality, their own legacy, and their own place in history. And as X sat there, quietly observing, he had unwittingly shown both men the power of a simple question, a question that would leave them both questioning the true meaning of success, achievement, and legacy. The conversation that unfolded between Elon Musk, Donald Trump, and Musk's young son, X, was not just a simple exchange of words. It was a moment that caused both men to reflect deeply on their lives, their choices, and what truly defines the legacy they hope to leave behind. What began as a casual dinner, meant to be a discussion about politics, the future of AI, and the direction of space exploration, turned into something far more personal. A quiet, seemingly innocent question from X, a question that cut through the noise of their daily lives, shifted the entire dynamic of the evening. In that moment, both men were stripped of their usual bravado, their facades as titans of industry and politics, and were forced to confront something much more profound, their own humanity. X's question, "Mr. Trump, are you afraid of being forgotten?" was simple, but it was profound enough to leave both Musk and Trump speechless. For two men who had spent their entire careers building vast empires and leaving an indelible mark on history, the idea that they might be forgotten, that all their achievements might fade with time, was something neither of them had ever truly considered. It was a question that spoke not to their accomplishments, their wealth, or their power, but to something much more intimate, the way they would be remembered by those closest to them, and whether the impact they had on the world would be remembered for the right reasons. The question wasn't about fame or fortune, it was about the essence of their legacy, the deeper meaning behind what they had built. At first, Trump, ever the showman, brushed it off with his usual confidence, listing off his many accomplishments and reminding everyone that his name was emblazoned on buildings around the world. "They'll be talking about me long after we're all gone," he said with a chuckle. But X wasn't interested in buildings or names on plaques. He wanted to know something deeper. His question had nothing to do with the surface-level accolades, it was about the person behind the name, the human being whose choices and actions had shaped the world in ways both seen and unseen. "What will they say about you 100 years from now?" X asked. "Will they remember who you really were?" Trump, who had spent years mastering the art of conversation, was taken aback. In all his years of public life, no one had ever asked him such a direct and personal question. Musk, too, found himself in unfamiliar territory. As the conversation shifted, it became clear that both men had never really stopped to think about their legacies in this way. Sure, they had been focused on building things, on changing the world, on winning at all costs, but the deeper, more philosophical implications of their actions had never really been on their radar. The question, as simple as it seemed, was one that struck at the heart of what it means to be human. Trump had always been driven by the need to succeed, to build something lasting, to leave behind a name that would stand the test of time. But in that moment, he realized that the world may remember his name, but it might not remember who he truly was. Musk, too, had spent his life pursuing innovation, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. He had created SpaceX, Tesla, and Neuralink, all projects that would change the future of humanity. But in the process, he had lost touch with the present. The cost of building these empires had been high in terms of time, relationships, and personal sacrifices. And now, in this quiet moment of reflection, he was forced to face the reality of those losses. Trump and Musk, who had spent their entire lives chasing the future, now found themselves confronting the past. They were questioning not just their legacies, but the very things that mattered most. In the pursuit of greatness, had they lost sight of the things that truly defined them as people? The relationships they had built, the people they had affected, and the way they had made others feel, those were the things that would ultimately define who they were. And yet, in their quest for success, these were the things they had often overlooked. As the conversation continued, Trump and Musk found themselves grappling with something much bigger than the pursuit of wealth or power. The true measure of a person's legacy is not in what they build, but in how they make others feel, how they change the lives of those closest to them. The moments that define us are not the big, headline-making achievements, but the quiet, everyday interactions that shape our relationships. And it was in these small moments, in the way they loved, cared, and affected those around them, that their true legacies would be written. For Musk, the question about being remembered wasn't just about his companies, his innovations, or his grand ambitions. It was about the time he had spent away from his children, the moments he had missed in the relentless pursuit of a future that was still uncertain. He had always justified his sacrifices by telling himself that he was building something bigger than himself, something that would benefit humanity. But now, with X's words ringing in his ears, he wondered if the price he had paid was too high. Would his children remember the man who had created a new era of technology, or would they remember the father who was never there? Trump, too, was forced to confront the truth that his legacy was not just about the buildings or the victories, but about how he had made people feel. The people closest to him, his family, his supporters, his friends, would be the ones who truly defined his legacy. And in that moment, he realized that no amount of wealth or power could replace the human connections that were at the core of what it meant to be remembered. As the night wore on, the conversation shifted again. X, with his unwavering confidence and insight, had unwittingly opened a door for both Musk and Trump, a door to deeper self-reflection, to a reconsideration of what truly mattered. The evening that had begun as a simple political discussion had transformed into a moment of profound introspection. And as the waves crashed softly against the shore, both Musk and Trump sat in silence, each grappling with the questions X had asked, each questioning the legacy they were building, and each wondering if they had been looking at the world the wrong way all along. For the first time, they were not focused on winning, on building, or on controlling the narrative. They were focused on something much more human, on the relationships they had built, on the people they had affected, and on how they would ultimately be remembered by those who mattered most. The evening had begun as any other high-profile gathering of powerful minds, an informal yet impactful meeting between two giants of industry and politics. Elon Musk, the tech visionary and innovator, and Donald Trump, the former president and real estate mogul, sat together, discussing the future of artificial intelligence, space colonization, and the possibilities of the next election. The conversation was supposed to focus on the bold, grand ambitions that had defined their careers. But in the midst of all the power, the ideas, and the big-picture discussions, something unexpected happened. It wasn't the headlines or the next big deal that captured their attention. It was a simple question, asked by a young boy sitting quietly between them. His question was sharp, unassuming, and direct. "Mr. Trump, are you afraid of being forgotten?" The question, though delivered with the sincerity and calm of youth, shattered the surface of their conversation. Musk and Trump, both of whom had spent their lives amassing power, influence, and wealth, now found themselves facing something far deeper than politics or business. They were confronted with their own mortality, their legacy, and the reality that history might not remember them the way they had imagined. For two men who had transformed industries, reshaped societies, and created empires, the idea of being forgotten, of their names being erased with time, was a thought they had never entertained. They had spent their lives building monuments, both literal and metaphorical, believing that their legacies would be carved into the history books, etched into the world for all to see. Yet X, with his childlike wisdom, had struck at the heart of something they had overlooked: what really matters when the noise fades? What is left behind after the triumphs and the headlines? Trump's initial response was classic. He laughed it off, boasting about his many accomplishments and the lasting impact of his name. "I've got my name on buildings from here to Scotland. They'll be talking about me long after we're all gone," he said, dismissing the idea of being forgotten as absurd. But X wasn't asking about his fame or the legacy of his name. He wanted to know who Trump truly was beneath the headlines. What will they say about you 100 years from now? Will they remember who you really were? X pressed. For the first time that evening, Trump paused. The confident, larger-than-life persona he had so carefully crafted seemed to falter, and for just a moment, he was faced with something much more personal: the possibility that his legacy could be remembered for the wrong reasons. He had spent his life trying to build a name that would echo throughout history. But the question forced him to confront the reality that history might not remember the man, but the brand. It might not remember his character, his struggles, or his true impact, only the image he had constructed. The weight of X's words lingered in the air, and Trump, for the first time, didn't have an immediate response. Musk, too, found himself in uncharted territory. As a man who had revolutionized multiple industries, from space exploration to electric vehicles, Musk had always looked to the future. He had built companies that promised to change the world, to propel humanity into new frontiers. But as the conversation shifted, Musk was forced to reflect on what he had sacrificed along the way. The question about being remembered struck a personal chord with him. He had devoted years of his life to creating things that would change the course of human history, but in the process, he had missed out on moments with his family, with his children, and on the quiet experiences that truly define a person's life. Musk had always justified his sacrifices by telling himself that the future was worth the cost, that one day, his children would look back and see the bigger picture. But now, with X's question hanging in the air, he wasn't so sure. The question wasn't just about being remembered, it was about being understood. What was the point of building a legacy if it came at the expense of the people who mattered most? Musk found himself grappling with a realization that had been buried under the weight of his ambition: maybe the most important thing was not what you build, but how you live. As the conversation deepened, both Musk and Trump found themselves wrestling with the idea of legacy in a way they never had before. It was no longer about winning, about achieving the impossible, or about conquering new frontiers. It was about the people they had touched, the relationships they had built, and how they had made others feel. The true measure of a person's legacy, they realized, is not in the monuments they leave behind, but in the way they change the lives of those around them. It's not in the grand gestures or the headlines, but in the small moments, the way they make others feel, the way they impact their families, and the way they treat the people closest to them. X, with his unassuming confidence and deep insight, had unknowingly guided both men to a place of reflection. He had asked the question that neither Musk nor Trump had been willing to ask themselves: what will they really be remembered for? It wasn't about their accomplishments or their fame, it was about their humanity. The way they had treated others, the way they had built relationships, and the way they had made people feel would ultimately define their true legacy. And in that moment, both Musk and Trump realized that the things they had been chasing, the wealth, the power, the accolades, were not what truly mattered. What mattered was how they had lived, how they had connected with the people who loved them, and how they had made those around them feel valued and understood. As the night wore on, the conversation shifted. X's question had done more than just make both men reflect, it had transformed the entire evening. It had moved from a discussion about technology, politics, and power to a profound exploration of legacy and meaning. And as the evening came to a close, Musk, Trump, and X sat together, each carrying with them the weight of the question that had been asked: what will you be remembered for? It wasn't the buildings, the businesses, or the headlines that would define them, it was the people they had affected, the lives they had touched, and the love they had shared. In the end, that was what truly mattered. The story between Elon Musk, Donald Trump, and Musk's son, X, teaches us a profound lesson about legacy and the true measure of success. While society often celebrates monumental achievements, wealth, and power, the story reminds us that what truly endures is not the name or the fame, but the impact we have on the people around us. X's simple yet powerful question about being remembered goes beyond accolades and titles, challenging both Musk and Trump to reflect on the deeper meaning of their lives. It reveals that, in the end, our relationships, the way we make others feel, and the lives we touch are what define us. Success is not just about what we build, but about how we live and love. Time erodes material accomplishments, but the kindness, understanding, and love we give to those closest to us leave a lasting imprint. The story urges us to reassess our priorities. Are we building a legacy that matters, not just in the eyes of the world, but in the hearts of the people we care about? True fulfillment comes not from what we achieve, but from how we make others feel remembered and valued.